Thank you, and thanks, Laura. I'm not going to focus very much on technical detail, but give a kind of broader sense of the things that have come up as issues in previous competitions, and things just that you might want to be mindful of if you decide to apply. Okay. So one of the things I wanted to say by way of introduction is that RfSC is relatively new, and obviously it's embedded in the NIHR family, but it's slightly different it has some aspects of difference to other calls, and is not an exact replica of RFPB. So we fall under RFPB, but we have similarities and differences. And I've got this slide here about how social care research and social care researchers have, for example, been critiquing and challenging narratives around adult social care. There's a useful "No More Wrinkly Hands" hashtag, which questions the kind of overuse in narrative and imagery of old people's, you see a pair of hands, you don't see a person. It's supposed to capture everything we need to understand about adult social care, which is way off in so many different ways. Obviously, the fact that we're not interested in people's hands and how wrinkly they are, but who the person is and what they're doing with their life. But also, of course, that we also know that a large proportion of people who access adult social care are not older people, but people of working age and young disabled people. So adult social care research, part of its job is to kind of question and critique these kind of sometimes misunderstood ideas about social care. And RfSC does that a little bit too in terms of its relationship with NIHR. And what I mean by that is sometimes we see applications from people who are sticking very strictly to what they, I think, perceive to be an NIHR looking application. So we sometimes see the overuse of evaluative approaches, applications for feasibility studies, proposals on their way to trials, and these may all be fine, but sometimes they're not the right approach, and sometimes there's a sense that applicants feel that they need to fit in the NIHR mold to be successful at RfSC. We actually welcome really diverse approaches to exploring adult social care, both in terms of methodology and topic. We don't stick to tiers. We don't necessarily expect to see a PPI named co-applicant. I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. But we do things slightly differently at RfSC, and it's kind of worth bearing that in mind, that we're not identical to RFPB. So some observations about things that work well or don't work so well for applicants that come to our panel. Now, this headline is important really about being social care savvy and being savvy about users and practitioners in relation to social care. As Laura has mentioned, the panel is made up of very experienced social care researchers with long careers in social care research. And I realised the word interloper here is a bit unfriendly, possibly, and maybe that's the wrong word, but it's true that what we sometimes see are applications from people who don't have any expertise in social care research in the team, and are not really asking social care research questions, and they're not disseminating to social care audiences, and they're sometimes I guess thinking that as long as the work is, for example, in a care home, that is somehow a social care research project. Well, the setting of a care home does not necessarily mean that the research question or research project is a social care orientated one. And It's a panel which will recognise if something is really coming from a social care place. And, we may sometimes think, well, this is a proposal which has a chance on other funding streams, RFPB, for example. This panel is for applications which very clearly foregrounds social care. So we're also looking for a demonstration of understanding the social care research terrain and some of the challenges of doing social care research. So, for example, our confidence is undermined when we see perhaps a research proposal saying we will survey every local authority in England and ask X and Y. Now, there may be cases in which a survey across all local authorities is absolutely the right thing to do, but it mostly is not, because we know of the pressures that local authorities are under and the likelihood of getting a very low response rate. We also know that if an applicant proposes questionnaires or data collection with carers or social workers, and they propose something which is burdensome or will ask people to fill in a diary 3 times a week, well, that's likely to be demonstrating that they haven't really understood how social care is currently organised and some of the pressures it faces. So we kind of want to understand and be confident that people have understood the social care terrain. We want to, we want to be clear that social care is the audience for the work. Now, it may not be the only audience. You may want to engage with and disseminate to other sectors, health or education or welfare, other types of audience. But again, we want social care to be front and centre as the audience for social care research. And then linking to Laura's point about collaboration, we want to be really clear that this is not that we're, proposals that come from 3 academics in the same department with no non-academic co-op or very little sense that the proposal is born out of the concerns and priorities of service users doesn't really, that does not have a great chance of success. So we really want to see the proposals are coming from the concerns and priorities of a wide range of people, including people that use social care. On collaboration, the committee sets quite a high bar for this. Now, you might say that a kind of traditional way of including user perspective or practitioner perspective is, for example, to have an advisory group which meets twice a year on which 2 people with lived experience attend. Now, that's kind of okay, but it's a very low bar for how meaningful collaboration and inclusion might operate. And if really good co-production and collaboration means that a study is more expensive, then in my view that's a strength, and that speaks to the second point here about we are reassured and more confident about proposals where the proper and full costs of collaboration, possibly co-production, are included. And we do pay quite close attention to how the costs for collaboration are included in a proposal. Seeing non-academic co-ops, seeing letters of support, these things are reassuring. We want to see how collaboration is running throughout the research. Now, in my experience, sometimes a traditional model for NIHR is to have, I say PPI, obviously we don't have patient involvement in social care. So we have kind of public involvement or user involvement. And in some of the proposals that we funded, people with lived experience are co-ops, co-researchers, working in lots of different ways across the whole life of the project. So we may not have a named PI person who is in at 2% and then who coordinates an advisory group or a steering group. That model may be okay and that model may work, but lots of social care researchers don't necessarily operate in that way. they embed the co-production and the collaboration across the cycle of the study. It's a committee who pay a lot of attention to equality and diversity issues, and are public user care practitioner members of the committee, also very vocal and about this committee. We particularly look out for random exclusions, which we get too many of. We won't include people whose first language is not English. We won't include people who have some kind of cognitive impairment. We won't include people with learning disabilities, etc., etc. There may be a really compelling reason why that's the case. I think they're rare, but applications which do this are unlikely to do terribly well. Again, we look very favourably on where applicants try to maximise inclusion across the lifespan of the study, and try and include as many different types of people as possible. And we particularly look to see how that's operationalised in the way the study is communicated to a wide range of audiences, and in the impact strategy. There's been a question about ECRs, and again, I think we really like applications where ECRs are being supported to perhaps lead for the first time with support or mentorship, or where their role is very clearly valued. We have sometimes had applications where it looks like the ECR is really central to the work, but has not for some reason not been named as a co-app. And we would generally go back and ask, well, what's going on here? So we really value this opportunity to support the ECR community. I won't go through every one of these. These are some. I know these slides are going to be made available, but these are some of the common reasons why things struggle. And the top one is perhaps often the most common, where we read a proposal and we think, well, it's really unclear why this has come to us, or what exactly is the social care research question here. Others are more generic about problems with the appropriate or detailed methodology around clarity and focus. We do sometimes see applications which we think ask too much of respondents. We do look for social care expertise in the research team, high levels of public involvement, good amount of detail about why the project's been done in the first place. We're quite interested in costs, and we will often ask a question about why is this study not asking a question about costs. That doesn't mean that we expect to see a full kind of cost or economic analysis in every proposal, but a proposal that's silent on the issue, completely silent on the issue of cost, may well be missing a trick, and we will sometimes go back to an application and ask them to say more on that. There are, if you're not aware, a range of resources and publications which you might find helpful if you haven't looked at them before. And these include ones published by the NIHR School for Social Care Research, which has quite a lot of resource about different methodological approaches in adult social care, synthesis, kind of evidence synthesis of work with different groups. It's a good place to go to if you kind of want to be sure that you have a sense of how well developed the evidence base is, or whether you feel like you're really addressing an evidence gap. And obviously you can have a look at the studies that we have funded before. And that's it.
Many thanks, David. We have a few minutes for questions, or we can also maybe, I don't know whether somebody more closely monitored the chat. Are there any questions?
There's been quite a lot of questions coming through that I think have been answered, but we've got a couple. There's a question here about appropriate outcome measures in social care research. and whether a bit more could be said about that.
Well, there are quite a lot of studies that look at this explicitly, including some recent SSCR studies about development of the ASCOT, which is one of the main outcome measures in adult social care. And there have been current kind of refinements to ASCOT, including making it more accessible to people that use services. It's not the only measurement of or outcome measure of adult social care. And I'm sure Stacey could say something more about this.
I can add a bit more in the chat, absolutely. Sorry, it was a bit strange asking that question when I'm probably someone who should be answering it. But there's a few other questions come through about applicants. Are you expecting to see an applicant team including members from more than one academic institution?
No. I mean, no. No is the answer. I mean, sometimes, you know, as I said, sometimes we see applications and it's one department and 3 people with the same disciplinary or kind of topic expertise, and that can be absolutely fine. You know, sometimes more compelling applications are across institutions, and you see, you know, a wider range of disciplinary expertise. But no, there's no fixed. You know, I think the concern is more about, you know, sometimes the fear of an application, which is, you know, 2 academics who are sitting in their office and working something out between them, which is not necessarily born of much very real world interrogation. That was probably more the point I wanted to make.
Okay, thank you, David. And that's all of the questions for now.